So, that being said, being in a family that is so engrossed in child abuse teaches you kind of how to project yourself to the world so that the world doesn't know your secret. And then I had the problem of being noticed by the occult and having my life hijacked and brainwashed and tortured and every other thing to forget what happened to me. I mean, I used in rape rituals and torture rituals and sold to, rented out to pedophiles, things like that. But the other thing they did was they used me to write music and to act. So I always was kind of taken seriously, and in my, like I said, in my hometown, people thought of me as something special because of a few of my friends got brought back to life when I was there. And I would answer people's questions, and people would come from sometimes, I don't know, I thought it was pretty far away, but, take a couple hours to get to my house to ask me a question when I was so little that they would have to kneel down or squat down in front of me to talk to me. I talked to the Dalai Lama about that once, and he said everybody did that because he's the Dalai Lama and that's what they have to do. But we talked about, being very, very young and having adults ask you questions, and you're supposed to know the answer. And he said, yeah, I did. And I said, yeah, I did too. But I think when you're young, everything is so simple, because you don't know what people are supposed to think. You just know kind of, especially if you're getting information from God and angels and things. Everything really sounds so simple. But, and so then, I was acting, and as a young person, little girls don't have breasts. And I don't know how men don't know this, but some of them don't. We're completely flat-chested when we're born, and we don't get breasts until 10, 12, 13. So I was cast as a boy a lot of times. They would put a wig on me and have me act, and I was cast as a boy. And I would go from one job to another, a boy in one and a woman in the other, like the Maltese Falcon on Mary Astor, and I was about 9. At the same time, I was in The Rifleman, and I was Mark. So, and that was The Rifleman. I want to talk about that because that was a really kind of a great experience. First of all, nobody seemed to know I was a girl. I a lot of times I'd be told, don't tell anybody you're a girl. But, like, wardrobe knew, and makeup knew, and I thought, that they knew, but they didn't. If I didn't say anything, then they didn't know. And I would use the Mark voice. When I was in Mark's clothes, I would use the Mark voice, because I thought, well, it's just going to be weird if I talk in my voice with these clothes on. So, but I want to talk about that. I got this job in an old Western. They don't make Westerns anymore. And and I never got asked if I wanted the part. I would just get there, they'd wake me up and say, you know, this is the audition, you got to do something, and then and I would, and in this particular case I got the part, but it was a TV show and it was a weekly thing, so it was a huge commitment. And I think they filmed it in California, and I lived in New Jersey, so it was a lot of traveling. Maybe they filmed it in the summer. I really don't know the particulars, but I do remember when I got the part, I thought, I don't even like Westerns. I don't want to be in a Western. I don't want to play a little boy every week. And the first two shows, I was really bad. I thought, well, I'm going to throw it, and they'll hire somebody else. And so I was purposely very bad. But the third week I got there, and I saw the script, and I thought, this is something. There's something to this. And I went over, I talked to the writer, and I said, is this what you're trying to do? You're trying to show right from wrong, good and evil. You're trying to show people how they should act. And he said, you got it. He said, I didn't want to make that proclamation because I was afraid that TV wouldn't want to do something like that. So I turned it into a Western, and I said, okay, I'll stay. And he was like, what? And I said, well, I've been really bad. I'm not acting the way I normally can, that I know I could act, and I like this, what you're doing, and I'm going to, from now on, I'm on board, you know, and I'll do a much better job, you'll see. So then I think I overheard somebody saying, you know, if he doesn't do better this time, you know, how about we go with that guy, you know, one of the other boys, the first runner-up. And so I went over and I said, you know, I understand what you're doing now, and I can do a lot better. And they said, oh, don't, you know, this is not your concern, and this and that. And I said, don't, yeah, I know I can do better. You just watch. And by the end of the thing, they were like applauding and saying, it was really great. What changed your mind? And I said, well, I like that you're trying to show people how to treat each other. And now that I can remember playing Mark, I started to watch The Rifleman. And I watched it at first just to see what kind of an actor I was. But I got sucked into it because it's really terrific. The writer had a real sense of right and wrong, and how you should treat people, and how people need to respect one another. And every show, it was only a half an hour, he managed to put a beginning, a middle, and an end all together that made a lot of sense. And I would highly recommend that you watch that show. It's not a traditional Western. Okay. And the other thing I wanted to say is that since nobody knew, except for makeup and hair, that I was a girl, they had me do all these things that a boy would do back in the day. And riding a mule, driving the carriage, chopping the wood, toting the water, throwing my dad his rifle. But at the end, when I started to grow breasts, I said, you know, I'm not going to be able to do this next season because I'm starting to grow breasts. And Chuck Connors said, "Isn't there some? Isn't there an operation or something for that?" And I said, "No, I want to grow them. I'm a girl." And they all, their jaws just hit the ground. And they said, "Well, why didn't you tell us?" And I said, "Well, I don't think I would have gotten the job. You wouldn't have changed the character for me, would you? You wouldn't have made it a girl." And they thought, and they said no, because girls can't ride horses. They can't drive a buggy. They can't chop wood. They can't plow the fields. They can't tote the water. And I started laughing because I said, well, that yeah, they can, because I did all those things and I'm a girl. And they thought, well, that is just the wackiest thing, because girls can't do those things. The other show I was in at the same time, maybe they probably filmed it in the winter, was Flipper, because that was filmed down in Florida. And I'm the one who got that dolphin to do all those things, and that was all telepathy. And you can poo-poo it all you want. You watch that. That dolphin and I could do just about anything. And that's when they had the idea for SeaWorld, that you could teach a dolphin to do these things. It wasn't that I taught that dolphin to do anything. I would just, think to it and it would do it. So they're really smart. And they say maybe they're as smart as a human. They're way smarter than humans. They know enough to use their telepathy. So they said the same thing, and I had to stop for the same reason. I couldn't. In fact, they brought me down to Florida because I wouldn't remember that they would just abduct me. They didn't ever question. They would just hit me with a hypodermic needle, and I'd go down like a bag of potatoes, and they'd put me on a plane, on a wheelchair, and take me to where I was going. And we get down to Florida, and I'm like, hey, I can't do this. I'm growing breasts. And they thought I was kind of a freak, The other show that I did as a boy was Oliver Twist. I was the little boy with the good voice. And Patrick and Annie Mame and Lord of the Flies, I was the head. That one was cutting it close. I was starting to develop breasts on that one. I was the head of the boys, the good boys. But then, the following week I'd be filling in for Marilyn Monroe, and spent a couple of weekends at her beach house with her. I knew a lot of people by that time. And the reason that they would have me try out for all these things, all the parts are really for little boys and not little girls, because they think that little girls can't do those things. But little girls sure as hell can, because little girls, like in Flipper, oh, we wouldn't have had you dive off the dock. We wouldn't have had you swim with the fish, And I'm like, that was like the whole show. And they said, yeah, that's why we couldn't have a girl. I'm like, but I am a girl, and I can do those things. Oh, well, no man will ever want you. You're right. In the meantime, on my acting, like as Mary Astor, I was getting proposals. So I knew they were lying about that one. It just was weird. Just really weird. Yeah, Mary Astor. Oh, and I played Nick and Nora on The Thin Man. Watch that movie. Nora is a pistol. And what they did was they liked how I looked as Mary Astor in The Maltese Falcon. but they weren't sure about my acting, so they said I could pretty much do whatever I wanted, and they weren't writing lines for me, so if I could come up with something, they'd be grateful. And so Nora is pretty much me the way I wished my parents would have been. Well, my parents, yeah, they never even, I don't know, they're weird people. My whole life has been really, really strange. And we'll leave it at that. Um, the sex, playing the different sexes had no adverse effect on me anyway. Straight heterosexual female over here. And it just was eye-opening that these guys who now knew I was a girl insisted that girls could not do the things that I absolutely could do and did do. And that's where the mindset changes. And everybody has to get on board that, yes, we can have a female president because women can do everything a man can do, except for with few exceptions of upper body strength. And even then, if a woman really wants to, she can build those muscles up too. So there's really the idea that a woman wouldn't be able to run a country. I think it's time for a woman to run a country, because men have really screwed it all up. And it's time for a woman to take over and fix everything.